All right, ben je vous lever? Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir.
Mr. von Wistinghausen, the technicians are reconnected, apparently, in the hopes it'll work better, but it may be that the problem is with the internet here rather than the place where he's testifying. So I'm afraid we'll just have to struggle on.
Yes, I guess we have no choice. Our case manager, who's fluent in Arabic, also communicated with the interpreters, and they agreed that he will raise his hand when he feels that too much is getting lost, so that I also know when I have to ask him to repeat. Okay, sir. Well, even in the modern European world, we have connectivity issues, probably more here in the Netherlands than where you are, but we are trying our best so that we can understand each other. Again, if you don't get my question or if you don't hear me well, let me know. And we may have to ask you to repeat the one or the other response if it doesn't arrive well here. All right?
Yes, all clear.
We were speaking about you and your family having fled to the mountains after the attack on your home village, and you described the dire situation there for you and everyone around you. Can you let us know how long you stayed in the mountains, and when did you decide to seek refuge in Delej? Did you hear my question, sir?
Can you please repeat the question?
We were speaking about you and your family seeking refuge in the mountain, and you described the dire situation there. Can you let us know how long you stayed in the mountains, and when did you decide to seek refuge in Delej?
Answer. As I told you, the attacks were intermittent. So you would have an attack now and later on another attack. So during this period of time, whenever an attack happened, we used to flee to the mountains, spend 2 to 4 days, for example, and then we would return to the village. So when the attack is over, people would return to the village and stay there. And then 2 to 3 days later, another attack happens and people flee again. However, during the last period, at the end of the first month of the year, attacks started being successive. So people then decided to leave and to go to Delej. So in December, January, and February, people would go like a group after the other and not all together, because if you would leave all together, you would be targeted. So people, every night, a group of people would leave. And each person have to find out the way to get there on their own, to try to reach the destination safely. So it took the people 2 to 3 months to for all the it took all the people 2 to 3 months to leave the area completely.
And when did you and your family arrive in Delej? And where did you stay there?
Answer. I sent my family ahead of me. So they left 1 to 2 weeks before I did. I stayed behind for that time. My uncle lived in Delege to the east of the center of Delege. He lived in the east to the east of the center of Delege, and he hosted us in his house. So I started my journey to Delege on Sunday and I arrived on a Monday. Usually the road from my village to Delege would take 4 to 5 hours. However, for security reasons, I had to move at night from the village and I arrived or reached Delege in the morning of the next day.
Can you tell us what the situation was like in Delege at the time? Were there many displaced persons there?
Answer. There was a large number of displaced people who got displaced from the areas that were attacked. So they came from the areas around Arwalla, the south of Delege. So most of the people were displaced and went to Delege. So the families were going successively, not all in one group. So a group would leave on a day and another group would leave on another day. On the way, there's a possibility that some of them would be killed also. So the road to Delege was fraught with dangers. So most of the displaced people were staying in the southern part of Delege, where there was a school and there was space for them near also the police station of Delege. People used to stay under the trees. And those who had people they knew in Delege, they would go to them. So the situation was difficult. So people were just trying to find a shaded area to stay in. Some people stayed inside the school. So people who had relatives in Delege, they went and they were hosted by these relatives too. However, most of the displaced people stayed in the southern part of Delege.
Was there enough food for everyone? And what happened to people who were sick or injured?
Answer. If a person is sick, then it's a problem. Because there were no possibilities or capabilities in this regard. And when the people started reaching Delege, they were starting to organize the displacement. There were organizations working and trying to organize some assistance. However, the assistance was very limited. When it comes to getting any treatment for any illness, that was very difficult because there were no treatments available anywhere. And if there was a wounded person, then the situation is very difficult. And most people were using local remedies, for example, extracts from trees or some local substances they use to heal people.
Can you put a date, more or less, on your arrival in Delege?
Answer. I arrived to Delege approximately at the end of February. So I left. So I arrived on Monday. So, and 5 days later, the problem, the biggest problem or the biggest attack happened. So I can tell you that that was around the end of February. It was a Friday also.
On this Friday, after your arrival in Delege, can you tell us what happened? What did you see on your way to the mosque?
Answer. On Friday morning in Delege, I found the city surrounded or besieged by the Janjaweed, who were on foot and on horsebacks. They also had vehicles. So at this point, we understood what was happening, but we also sensed that the village or the town was under siege. The people inside were moving normally, but there were fears among the people. Afterwards, the Janjaweed started searching the village house by house. And during these search operations, they were taking the men to the police stations. At approximately 12 to 1 at noon, I was going home. And the movement in Delege, the movement of the people in Delege was normal on that day. So the market was open, people were going and coming to the market. But the displaced persons who were in the southern area were the most affected by the siege. So at some point when they rounded up all the people, we found the people lying down in front of the police station. And then when I was on the way to the mosque, I saw all this scene in front of me. So at this point, I understood that there was something bad happening. So when I exited the mosque, I saw that the people were lying down on their bellies with their mouth open on the floor and they were being beaten. I also saw some soldiers walking on the backs of people. This was very terrifying for people. So at that point, I returned home, where I stayed for a period of time. So, and then all these people were taken and the Janjaweed left also, and the rest is history. You know what happened.
What do you mean by the rest is history? You know what happened. Tell us what happened or what you saw.
Answer. So they started taking people away in groups. The people thought that these people were taken from the police station to another police station. However, these people were taken to places where they were executed. They were killed. So they were taken to near a village called Pasca, so where there was a khor or a creek. So there's a group of people were taken there. Another group was taken to another area where they were executed as well. So all the people who were there were killed.
You said that you saw the people being detained, and don't mention their names, but I would like to know, did you recognize any of these detained persons? Did you know any of them?
Answer: the people are known. The people who are detained are known. I know some of them. So some I don't know, and some I do know, because some of them come from the same village as I am. And I saw some of them being detained, yes.
Can we, Madam President, just very briefly go into closed session so that he can give the names of the persons that he recognized and knew personally, please?
Yes, private session, please.
We're back in open session, Madam President.
You said, sir, that you walked back from the mosque to your home, or the house where your family was staying. Can you tell us what happened on the way back? Who did you meet?
Answer: when I left the mosque, we were a group of people going back to the village. So I looked and I saw the people that I mentioned. But before I went to the mosque, I saw them walking there in the morning. When I was going to the mosque, I was walking cautiously because there were some people around who were armed.
Did you meet a gentleman called Mulonkwe?
Answer: I saw Abdallah Musa, who also known as Mulonkwe. So after I returned from the mosque and I went home, at approximately 5 in the evening, I passed in front of the market. And when I exited my house on the way to the market, there's a crossroads. And this is where I saw him. This is where I saw Abdullah, and Abdullah is the person who confirmed to me that the people were killed. I was the first person who saw Abdullah, and he was coming from the location of the event. He was injured above his eye. So on the way, I was walking, and I did not see him. So he called me. He saluted me. He greeted me, and he told me what happened. And he told me not to go anywhere. He told me to go back home and not to go anywhere because all the people who were detained were taken and killed. He told me that he was in the location of this incident, this event, and he was injured in his head. He showed me the head injuries that he had. So this was a very difficult situation. I was almost having a mental breakdown. So he went to the mosque, and shortly afterwards he passed away. But this man, Abdullah, I saw him in person, I saw him directly, and I talked to him.
This news of the detained persons in Delej and the executions that you had heard of, did this news spread quickly and in Delej? And can you tell me what the reaction of the full community was to this terrible news?
The Fork community is a peaceful one. After they heard the news, people didn't have anything to do. They couldn't do anything except to grieve and cry. I personally, when I knew about this news, I couldn't even carry or render this news to the other people. I was unable to tell them the news. It took me some time. Even they asked me. They said, "What's wrong with you? You're daydreaming and silent. What's happened?" It took me a long time, and eventually I told them what happened. That was very difficult. The community in Darfur didn't do anything aside from grieving. They couldn't do anything. They had nothing to do. They were unable to do anything.
Is it your understanding that community leaders were amongst the detained and executed? And if and if so, what was the particular impact on the Four community in Delej?
Part of my answer when you ask me what you had witnessed in the yard in Mukjar, because you asked me, but I didn't say. I know that there were some leaders. One of them is Adam Ahmed, who is called Omda Kundiri. He's my maternal cousin. And when the events started, they captured were the leaders. Also, Adam Abd Al Rahman was also captured or detained in the prison. Adam Abakr Rizq was also detained in the police station as well. Sheikh Suleiman, also known as Dubukabi, also Hassan al-Baitri, all these were detained. Also, Suleiman, there was a brother called Suleiman, I don't know his last name, but he was also detained. Also Omar Rashid, who was also detained. Another person was called Ali Kamis. These came from different villages, but these people were all present, and they were all leaders. Omda Jiddu also, and Adam Idris Omda, Adam Abakar Rizq was a sheikh. These were detained, and I know that some leaders and these leaders were detained, and they were actually captured before they started capturing or detaining the regular citizens.
Do you know whether these incidents were reported to the police or any other authorities at the time?
Answer. This happened in front of the police. The police didn't have any prerogative. There was a person called Juma in the police station. His name was Juma Fadali. He was the chief, the police chief. He was somewhat criticizing some aspects, but he wasn't able to do anything.
You said to us that it took you some time to be able to speak about what you saw and what you heard. Can you tell the judges how you feel about it now, 2 decades later? Can you say what's the impact of these events on you today?
Answer. These events are indeed tragic, and they make you feel how vulnerable you are. You are being wronged, and you can do nothing about that. That is a very difficult feeling. We hope and wish that justice is established eventually.
So we will now move on to the time where you reached a refugee camp, and we are not going to mention the name of that camp. Because after the events of that Friday in Delej that you described, my understanding is that you and your family left Delej. Can you explain to us where you went, again, without mentioning the specific location, and if you still reside there today?
Answer. We moved from Delage after these events, and we headed to Niala. We suffered a lot on the way. There was a lot of searching. Anyone could possibly hit you or beat you. Until we reached Zalinji, where we found also some security measures. And we passed until we reached Niala. People there suffered a lot from the severe or difficult conditions. There were camps and some gatherings. And if you happen to have a family member or you know someone there, you would go to them. My brother lived in that city, and I went to him. Some days later, we heard about the establishing some camps. The government would not cooperate with these gatherings. They would reject or refuse to help. So that was the place where people would seek refuge in. What happened moved the international community and conscience, and the result was that some organizations started moving, which I would like to thank all the organizations that helped us and served humanity. They provided shelter for us, and they specified specific locations for the camps. Despite all the challenges, there were grave challenges, whether from the side of the government or the Janjaweed. Despite all these challenges, every person in every camp would face challenges. If you would exit the camp, you would be in trouble. And also, the government later provided some forces for these camps. So this resulted in some security issues facing the citizens. Despite all of this, people were patient and resilient. It was very difficult. But what was relieving somewhat was the organization's work. As I mentioned, they work well. They provided some health care, food, education or health education. They provided what they were able to provide. Thanks to them, there is some sort of stability in these camps. That's how these camps came to be formed, and people started to settle down and be able to have food. It's the international organizations who were able to achieve that.
Can you tell us how long it took, more or less, from Delej to the camp where you still reside now? How long were you on the road?
That we moved from Delej at about 11 or 12 a.m. There were some difficulties along the way, and on the following day we reached Niala about 10 in the morning. Uh, 10 hours there and 12 hours, so I think 20 plus hours the whole journey.
When you arrived in the camp, can you estimate how many people had arrived and were living in this camp during your first year there? Are we talking about hundreds, thousands?
And so this camp the inhabitants were in thousands. In thousands. And the people from all over Darfur would head from to these camps because there was shelter and some sort of security. So people would flock there. So people would come to these camps. At some point, we would some units were in where the number was 200, 300. So from a camp to a camp, the number varies depending on the size. So in a big camp, the number could reach 300, approximately. So this is how the camps work because people actually gathered there and went there in big numbers.
And from what ethnic group or tribes were most of the refugees in the camp where you are staying?
Answer. After we arrived in these camps, we found people from different tribes, from so many tribes. In some camps, the ethnicities would differ. In some camps, you would find 20 or 20 plus ethnicities. In some other camps, 10 to 15. So there was a mix of all ethnicities.
Were there many people from the Fur tribe as well?
Answer. The majority in most camps belong to the Fur, because the Fur tribe was the largest in number, so it was one of the biggest tribes. And they would be the majority in any camp. Fur, Zagawa, Masalit, these are the different tribes, besides the other tribes.
So I will show you pictures now and ask you to comment on them. We sent a PowerPoint presentation with a few pictures. It's the presentation is DAR V47 5x0271. And if we could show slide number 1.
Can these be publicly displayed?
It can all be publicly displayed, yes.
Yes, thank you. On evidence, right. Evidence channel 2. Right, thank you.
These pictures are about the housing situation in the camp. Can you explain to us what you see in these pictures? Are these normal houses in the refugee camp? What are the conditions of these houses? Please explain to us.
Answer. I can explain in reverse. Number from 4 to 3 to 2 and then ending by 1. Number 1. Pictures number 1. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Picture number 4 and number 3. These are the actual images of the early stages of displacement. They lived in shelters similar to these. For example, back home we used to live in huts made of hay or straw. So we moved from big huts to smaller huts. These are similar to the smaller huts. So this was the early stages of displacement, and all the camp looked like this. And after the arrival of the organizations, we would get the plastic covering, which we would use on top. After that, there were some challenges. As I mentioned, there were some police and the government permitted the organizations to work. But what we would receive from these organizations would not be sufficient, and they tried to disperse the work of these organizations. There was random shooting from the police and the army. So people were concerned. Some people were injured by bullets. So they would try to improve the construction and the structure of the accommodation. So the pictures you see in number 2, 4, and 3, it's possible that there is a hole inside for people to hide in and see cover from the bullets. So pictures number 2 and 1, people started to build with mud with the help of the organizations. So they would use the plastic covering to give a message that this is a camp. That was a camp. This is how people live. This is how people reside inside the camps. Until this very day, 2023.
Do you get electricity to these houses?
Answer: no, there is no electricity whatsoever. We didn't have electricity in our places of origin, not to mention these places. So in our localities, we didn't have electricity, not to mention these camps. Some people use gasoline, and this also depends on the ability of people to provide gasoline. Or organizations sometimes provide gasoline, and which they use for the services of the center. Some people use generators for the stores, for the shops. Even charging your mobile phone, you would pay for that. So you would take your phone to a center and pay for the phone to be charged, because that was a business someone was conducting.
Can you say how the lack of proper housing and electricity, that probably you're used to because you have no choice, but how do you feel it affects the overall well-being of the people who live in the camps?
Are you referring to the lack of electricity? I didn't understand the question quite well.
Yes, I wasn't probably very clear. I mean the lack of proper housing, but also the lack of electricity.
This affects us mentally because we have the sense that we are not we do not belong to that state, to that country, because currently electricity, drinking water, proper shelter, these are life necessities. Any person must have access to these things. People should not struggle to have some water, drinking water.
Can you describe what your own house looks like? And what property does your family own, if at all?
Repeat the question. The voice was not clear. It's breaking up.
Can you tell us what your family's home looks like? And do you have any property in your house?
At the beginning, in the camp, people would have some form of mattresses or ground cover, and we would receive these covers or mattresses from the organizations. And this came along with food services. And the plastic cover, we would receive this to help us in the fall. With the passing of time, people would try to work, save some money, and they started to furnish. For example, later on you would have a bed and nothing more. So for you to be able to buy a bed, it requires a lot. And families don't have most of the necessities. For example, TVs and other things similar to that. We didn't have any of this.
You were speaking about the assistance of help organizations during the first few years that you were living in the camp. And I would like you to look at the second slide of pictures, which supposedly shows humanitarian aid and shelter distribution. Can you comment on these pictures? What do you see?
Yes, these pictures, I see how people from the different organizations provided services. At some point, they would be able to buy these things with money. So they would be also able to provide health care. So they would do this in the huts. So they would use this material in the huts, inside the huts, and use plastic as blankets. Also, sometimes there were fires in the camp. So the organizations would try to save people and rescue them and provide the same materials to rebuild the homes. So yes, this is how organizations used to help us. So this was the compensation people would receive in case of any incidents. These are real pictures.
This picture number 3, does it show shelter that is kind of rolled and distributed to newcomers in the camp? Or how does it work, the distribution?
Answer. The distribution happens in two cases. So when there's an excuse, a person has an excuse or has justification to receive such a thing from the organization. So for example, in order to rebuild the hut after a fire. And the second case is when there's the person is a newcomer, is a recently displaced person, so this person would receive these in order to be able to build their own house. Even for the toilet, they make a wall from these materials that are present in the picture.
And these shelters that we see would still need some plastic protection on top in order to be waterproof? Do I understand that correctly?
Answer. So it needs a plastic cover in order to protect from the water. If there is no plastic cover, then the water would infiltrate through the straw in order to enter. So these huts or these houses need plastic to be protected from the water. As for the toilets, sometimes they are covered with plastic and sometimes they aren't.
Let's speak about the distribution of food, and this is on the third slide. Can you describe what you see on these pictures? How often is food aid distributed in the camps, and who receives this aid and who doesn't? Can you explain to us, please?
Answer. So this place, people come to this place in order to receive the food assistance. So there's a group of people who would distribute this food, and the people would come in small groups in order to receive the food aid. And one person gets a quantity of food for several persons. So the organizations, the humanitarian organizations, were organizing this distribution. The second and the third pictures show also the market. So we also see the commerciant, the trader selling millet or corn. And the organizations also come and do studies on the market to see what is the situation and how people are behaving there. And the organization tries to find better solutions all the time. So you can see on the right that there are people from the organization who came on a field visit to the market in order to take stock of the situation. And you can see behind the houses how the houses look and how people stand in order to get the food. There's a picture that's not very clear to me. Picture number 4. As far as I see, I think this is the market. Is that clear?
It's for you to tell, because I haven't been there. But if you recognize it, it's fine, and if you don't worry. I was going to ask you if there are certain criteria for a refugee in the camp to receive some food supply, is there enough for everyone, or how does the distribution process work? And maybe I should say we should make the difference between the time where the help organizations were on the ground and the time after that.
Answer. At the beginning, there were international organizations active there. and they were distributing the food twice maybe per day, and the situation was somewhat better. However, when the organizations left, the situation became difficult. And we do not get sufficient quantities of food. And this is a problem. At the moment, the quantity of foods that is available is not sufficient. And lots of people also now are trying to find different ways to get their food. Some of them are maybe going into debts. So people, and also the tickets that people used to get from organizations now are being divided. They are not sufficient also for people. So, and we don't know, some people don't know whether they're getting food now or in 2 months. I think that providing food supplies is the task of the government. However, the government is not doing that. Now, there's no food at all. There's no food at the moment. There's no food for the displaced persons at the moment.
You mentioned that in the early years, the help organizations were very present and helped a lot. But those organizations eventually left the camp. Can you tell us when this was and why?
Answer. That was a part of the policy of the government. So the organizations were expelled. And that was based on a decision from the presidency of the state. There was a decision or an order for these organizations to be expelled, to leave between 2015 or 2016. So they left based on the decision of 2016. The government ordered all international organizations to leave.
And when you say now there is no food at all, you're referring to the situation in October 2023, probably since the new outbreak of the conflict in April this year. Is that right?
Answer. Yes, after the last conflict, the situation became even worse. It exacerbated a lot. There's no food, there's no mobility, there's no life. In the past, even if there was no food, people had mobility. They could move around. People used to go to work, women could work, the youth could work, men could work, could do different types of jobs in order to get, maybe to buy some goods and to solve some of the issues they face. However, after the 15th of March, and it's been 6 months, the city itself collapsed. So we cannot even walk in the city. Moreover, the camps are in the worst situation possible. Inside the camp, there are no problems, but if you exit the camp, you will face a lot of problems. Because outside, there are lots of security issues. You can be robbed, you can be killed, women can be raped. So now people are just being conservative or staying inside the camp. So the situation is difficult right now. Some people don't even have enough food to eat one meal every few days. So the suffering and the struggle of the people is very difficult.
We will speak a bit more about the current situation a bit later today. I wanted to ask you about the sanitation situation in the camp, which you have already touched upon, and if you could have a look at the pictures that are now on the screen, which show the water situation in the camp. That is slide number 4. Can you explain to us what we see on these pictures, please?
Answer. Picture number 3. So this is where you can see organizations providing sanitation or water services. So they were the source of the water and the facilities. So I confirm that picture number 3 is the work of the organizations. Picture number 2. I told you earlier that when we were in the villages, there were 2 sources of water. So we have the water streams in the valley. So picture number 2, this is the current water streams where we get water. And people can dig a hole to get some clean water, but we cannot get the clean water from the surface. Picture number 1 shows a well. And the well was the source of water for the villagers, and this is where they used to get drinking water from. So the well was the source of water, the main source of water for villagers.
And how do you get the water from the wells to the houses?
Answer. The women used to use water recipients or water buckets to transport the water from the well to the houses. Some people had donkeys, for example, that could transport larger buckets of water. They used to come collect the water and move it to take it to further locations. So there's also the mechanism of the water bucket that is attached to a rope. So you just lower the bucket using the rope, get the water, and pull it back up.
I suppose that sometimes it rains, especially, of course, during the rainy season. There can be heavy rains, which sometimes provoke floodings in the camp. If you have a look at the pictures now in front of you, can you describe to us what you see? And is this something that has happened where you live?
Answer. This happened a lot and in most camps. So such cases happen in most camps. So you can see a house built from local material that has been taken by the water. The quantity of water that you see here is has a strong surge that takes everything with it. However, when these incidents, these natural things happen from God, we have to accept them, but they increase our suffering. So I was talking about the pictures below. The pictures above show the houses made of mud, how they become humid, and then they fall apart. Sometimes some people die when they are in these houses and such incidents happen. The floods can also take away children. So when the surge is strong, people can die, can drown. So this happens in lots of the camps, and these are real pictures that embody and show the struggle and the suffering of the people who live in these camps. This is a reality. These are real images that depict the reality.
Can you tell us how the people cope with that situation, and do they receive any kind of assistance then to rebuild their houses?
Answer. As I told you, a situation is different from another situation. At the beginning, in the early days, when such a problem would happen, the next morning you would find the organizations present and working. And they would make some sort of berms in order to reduce the risk, the danger of floods in the future. Like, they also help the people who are affected. They provide the affected people with services. However, after the expulsion of the organizations from the area and only simple, small national or local organizations were present, there are some simple assistance, but it's very symbolic and it's not very significant. So there's a possibility that you would lose your home and you would not be compensated, or you not get any assistance to rebuild. So in theory, there are services that are being provided, but actually on the ground, no services are being provided. And now, after the recent events, there is nothing being provided. Nothing is being provided. Only there's solidarity between the people who help each other. So if I have something, I share it with the others. So now there is nothing that we can rely on.
You have also touched upon other calamities like fire. If we look at the next pictures, can you tell us what you see?
Answer. This picture shows that there are crops or foodstuffs that are burned. And as I told you, people struggle and suffer in the camps. And some people leave the camps, they walk for some distance and they try to plant some crops, such as beans and corn. And they contribute to the assistance and the aid that people get. So these crops would help the people. And the people who plant these crops can sell them, and then this could contribute to the education of their children. Sometimes a fire can happen. usually the fires happen in January or February when there's strong wind. Some fires happen by themselves and some fires are man-made. However, the fires, the flames eat the houses that are nearby and they create great damage. And if the houses are close to each other, then the fire would spread from a house to the other. In some instances, 20 to 30 houses were burned in one fire. Moreover, there are no firefighting means or material. So people cooperate together in order to try to fight the fire all together. So they try to create some sort of a space that to cut the fire. So they try to protect an area and make a barrier to stop the fire from spreading. They make a line to stop the fire. So some people go to try to do water sources in order to bring the water to extinguish the fire. However, fires are the biggest problem because when a fire happens, the damage is very big.
You were mentioning earlier this morning that in your home village you had a specific type of construction that was fireproof, or at least that wouldn't burn easily. Is this something that could be reproduced in the camp, or is it impossible?
Answer. This is a beautiful question. So I'm talking here about the silo of the village. This is where people used to take refuge in. However, in the camps, such structures are very rare because there's not even corn to be stored anyway. So some families can produce 40 to 50 sacks. Organizations bring 40 to 50 sacks to the camp, and a person or a household would get only one sack. So you wouldn't need such a space to store it. So people didn't think about building these structures in the camp.
Yes, probably it wasn't a very smart question, but it just crossed my mind and I wanted to ask you if it was an option against fires.
He told you it was a beautiful question.
Yes, well, he's so polite. He's a real gentleman. Anyway, so, sir, the camp is certainly organized in a certain fashion because there is many people living there. Can you tell us how it is organized and governed? The community leadership structures that you had in your home villages, were they in a way reproduced in the camps?
Answer. The administrative system is inherited. So as soon as the people came to the camp, the first thing they thought about is to form a body that can secure the situation for the people. So they started with the sheikhs. So for example, when people come to and stay in an area in the camp, a sheikh is nominated for this area. So this person, this sheikh, is the person who communicates with the organizations. This sheikh is the person who knows who are the newcomers. So this is how the system, the governing system in the camp is. And the camp is divided into centers. You have center 1, center 2, center 3. And some camps are divided into squares. Square 1, square 2, square 3, square 4, for example. Or block. So in each block or each center, you would have a head or a president elected by the sheikhs. So let's say there are 8 centers in a camp. So these 8 centers, they get together in order to choose a president or a chairman for the entire camp. So this is when it comes to the camp, and the head of the camp is the person who organizes. For example, if there is an organization coming to the camp, this chairman, this person, organizes the work with this organization. He or she gives the number of the refugees that are present in the camp, divides the tasks of these people on how to distribute the assistance. So in general, the system, the administrative system, is a good system that is accepted by the displaced persons in the camps. And nowadays, we don't have problems in the camps because all the people cherish each other and they respect each other. And despite the differences, when there are different tribes present in the camp, they all live in solidarity.
You described this morning that the medical situation in your home village wasn't easy. How is it in the camps? Do you get any medical assistance?
Answer. This question has an answer with 2 parts. So the first part is when the organizations were present and healthcare was related to or linked to these organizations. So there was support. There were health centers available in the camp, and they provided good services. And also there was also good educational services when there were organizations working there. However, when the organizations were expelled, we returned to ground zero. The services became weak. There are health centers, but they have very weak services. And after the latest conflict, the situation became even more dire. There's malnutrition among children. And at the moment, there are only 2 centers that are functional or operational in the center, in the camp. And all the other health centers are out of service in the camp. So this is one of the problems.
Can you tell us what your personal family situation is today? How many children do you have? How many were born since you live in the camp?
Answer. Thank God, I have 2 wives. A message from the interpreter. The sound in the microphone makes it impossible to understand the witness.
The interpreters didn't get your response. Can you maybe move closer to the microphone? We just heard that you have 2 wives, but maybe you can repeat what you said after that.
Answer. I have 2 wives and children. When I came from my village to the camp, I had 3 children. So I had 3 children back then, 2 boys and 1 girl. Now in the camp, I have 5 girls and 4 boys. So the total number is 9 children.
So 6 children were born in the camp. Can you describe what it means to raise small children in a camp?
Answer. Raising children is very difficult in the camp. But thankfully, I think that God gave me a lot. Because none of my children are delinquents. Because lots of people also dropped out and left their education. Moreover, my work conditions give me the opportunity to be closer to my children. It's true that they study with me at school. So, but thankfully, I did not see anything wrong with them. However, the living situation is difficult and we have a modest life. But I would like to thank God for giving them to me, and I ask Him to keep them in good health.
You said that since the new outbreak of the conflict in spring this year, most people can't go to work anymore due to the difficult security situation. But before that, what type of work do most people in the camp do? What are the possibilities of earning some money in normal times, if I may say?
In other times, as I mentioned, all the people in the camp would work. Women would work in the farms, in the neighboring farms, so they would work there. And some would go to the cities to work there, to work in the houses of people, to earn some money. Men as well would. Sorry, I also need to talk about women. They would work with as bricklayers or carriers. So they would go to some areas and help work there, which helps them earn some money. Men would go to Niala, they would work in trade. So they would, for example, take some commodities, some goods from a merchant, and then they would sell them in the market, pay back to the merchant, and make some marginal profit. Some people would work in the market. Some people would have any craftsmanships which they would practice to earn some livelihood. Elderly people would work as guards or doormen. So they would work in any kind of job. So whenever you would go out seek a form of employment, you would find only God provides. But this is how people would work and find work. Yet some other people also would work in the organizations, but they were very few. So this is how people worked and lived, and how they would make their livelihood there.
I think, Madam President, this is an appropriate time for a break, and I can say that we've done good progress. We won't need the whole afternoon session.
I was just going to ask you, I mean, it seemed to me you were coming towards a conclusion of his evidence. Or is that wrong? Because if so, and you can do it in 10 minutes or 15 minutes, then we'll sit on to conclude. But
No, I'm sorry, I can't do it in 10 minutes.
No, all right.
And I would say I still need half an hour
Yeah.
or so. And it also depends on some of his answers when I get to more general questions.
It's all right. All right, sir. We'll take the break for lunch now, which will last for 1.5 hours, and we'll sit again at 2:30. Just before we adjourn, so thank you, sir. You can leave and go for lunch. Mr. Edwards.
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Mr. Edwards, it suddenly occurred to me that when the prosecution opened their case, they very kindly gave us a copy of what was going to be said. There's no necessity for you to do so, but if it were possible, it just enabled us to follow and possibly mark.
Yes, that will be with you by the end of today.
Right.
Perhaps first thing tomorrow morning.
That's fine, and I'm assuming it's half French and half English.
Yes, it is.
That's right, Rob. Well, that's fairness. Yes, all right, thanks very much. Yes, 2:30, please.
All rise, veuillez vous lever.